So let's jump into it. A bit about the Northern Australian Climate Program, NACP. So NACP is a jointly funded program between MLA, the Queensland Government, and the University of Southern Queensland, and it sits under a broader program called the Drought and Climate Adaptation Program. It's got a variety of activities and exercises under it. These include research and development activities, but also extension work, which is sort of what we're doing here this evening, is communicating and extending the information to producers and landholders on the ground that can actually use it. We've got extension officers appointed all across Northern Australia, and we call these climate mates, and there's no surprises in guessing that I'm the climate officer for this region, and I've been in that role for a couple of years now. The reasons for NACP were that we had low relevance or relatability of the existing forecast systems, tools and information to actual management decisions that get made on property for graziers. And there was a lack of understanding in the resources and tools that were available, and a lack of support from climate experts and extension staff that were upskilled and informed in this space. The reason for the webinar this evening is to provide you with insights that are accurate, so using forecasts that graziers can trust, while at the same time providing them with the interpretation support to make sure that they're actually able to understand the information appropriately. And the next part is that the insights that we generate for you are timely. So they providing this information early enough so that graziers can still respond in terms of their management. Hence why we're having it in September, because we assume that there's still enough time over the next month or month and a half for people to get out there and make some changes to their grazing land management. So this evening, Chelsea Jarvis, Dr. Chelsea Jarvis will kick us off with a seasonal climate outlook. Chelsea's at the Centre for Applied Climate Sciences at the University of Southern Queensland. She's going to talk for 25 to 30 minutes, and then just at the end, I'm going to jump online for 10 minutes and talk about what that might mean, what this forecast might mean in terms of your grazing land management. And I've tried to condense the reason for this evening and the reason for the program into that last sort of sentence at the bottom of the page there. What we want and what we hope graziers to do is to analyse and interpret seasonal climate information, and then modify or adjust their grazing land management and business operations accordingly. Some years, there won't be a hell of a lot of modifications or adjustments to make. Other years with serious or extreme climate forecasts, there could be a fairly large impact from looking at these seasonal climate forecasts or outlooks. I'm going to pass over to Chelsea now and stop sharing my screen. She's going to jump online, and I'll be up and talking again in about 25 minutes, I assume. So Chelsea, I'll stop sharing and pass over to you. There you are.
Great, thanks for that, John. Really appreciate that. So welcome everybody. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I know it's sort of beer and wine 30, but hopefully you're enjoying those while watching. Okay, so like John said, I'm just going to briefly discuss what's coming ahead. It probably won't even take 25 or 30 minutes. So as John mentioned, we're with the Northern Australia Climate Program, and we do research, development, and extension, but that means because we're integrated, we actually get feedback from producers as to sort of what kind of tools they want. So on the left-hand side there, we can see on the top the Northern rainfall onset forecast, and then on the bottom, the burst potential forecast. And I'm just going to briefly talk about those two products as well, because they're relevant to the upcoming season. So one important thing to remember about any seasonal forecast is that it falls under climate. So climate is anything longer than your sort of 7 to 10 day window. So 7 to 10 days, that's your weather forecast. And your climate forecast is anything longer than that. So fortnightly, monthly, seasonally, 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, all of that falls under climate. And it's really interesting to know because there's actually two completely different system models that put together our forecast. So one model does weather and a completely different model does climate forecasts. So they are two totally different things. I think a lot of people think about them in the same way and think that they can use them and interpret them the same way, but actually they're completely different to sort of use and interpret. It's sort of like, if somebody from the city came out to talk to you and said, oh, hey, you have cattle. Oh, have you ever thought about getting into chickens? You might be like, no, why would I get into chickens? And they're like, well, they're pretty much the same thing, right? Chickens, cow, like it's lives, it's animals. And I think lots of people think about that way about weather and climate. We can think about chickens like the weather, they're sort of a shorter term thing, and then cattle like climate, longer term. Anyway, let's just take a quick look at how the past winter has been. Some places actually got some rain a bit unusually. So for example, Mount Surprise got 11 mils on the 12th of May, which would have been unusual for them. Almaden, 12 mils on the 1st of July. Normanton, I know 4 mils on the 31st of August probably doesn't sound too exciting, but that's way more than what you could normally expect to get, which is 0. And then Mariba, 17th on the 1st of September. So that one's more reflected in this one. So, and actually, like if anybody has any cattle in the Southern Gulf area, some areas down there actually got sort of 50, 60 mils in one go in August, which is really surprising. So yeah, so winter is winter. It's normally dry, but we did have a couple random showers here and there. Okay, so I just wanted to briefly mention our new rainfall burst forecast. This forecast essentially was developed by producers because producers told us, they said, hey, we really need a forecast for meaningful rainfall. We don't actually care if we're going to get 4 mils. And so we took that to our developers and they came up with this burst forecast. It needs a different name because burst just makes me think of icky things. Anyway, so essentially what it shows is you can select an amount. So either 20 mils, 30 mils, 50 mils, or 70 mils that is likely to fall within 3 consecutive days in a given time frame. So if we look at this forecast, we can see the time frame is the 23rd of December to the 5th of January. And it's the chance of receiving 70 millimeters for this one within 3 consecutive days within that fortnightly period. So any 3 days within those 2 weeks. And so essentially for most of the Gulf Savannah area, we're sort of looking at 50 to 75% chance. And then some areas in that darker purple or more violet purple are above 75%. So pretty good chance. And then if we look at what actually happened, we can actually see this one did quite well actually at predicting these larger amounts. So some areas obviously got way more than 70, but for this forecast, 70 is the highest value for it. But there was sort of that band all through there. That's pretty well reflected through there, and then up into the Northern Territory as well. But so look for this forecast to become available early next year, or if you want access to it now, John can provide you with the passcodes to access it now, if that's something you're interested in. Okay, so just some thoughts before we go into looking at what's ahead for the next few months. So one thing I always get is that people don't trust the forecast because they're always wrong, specifically the seasonal forecasts. And it turns out, like I've done my own analysis. So essentially I'll pick a place like Georgetown and I'll look at the forecast for the past 2 years. And then I'll look at what actually happened and say, was the forecast right? So if the forecast was saying that you're likely to get more than your median amount of rain or normal amount of rain, did you get that amount of rain? Yes or no? And that's how I sort of judged it. So a very, not a scientific official way, but a very human producer way to look at a forecast. And the forecasts tend to be right about 70% of the time, which is actually in line with what other scientific studies have found. So if you're finding that the forecasts are correct less frequently than that, there could be something else going on. The main thing that happens is usually that the forecasts are misinterpreted. Think back to the chicken and the cattle sort of example. And also it's really important to remember that the forecasts are a vibe. So it's like they show if there's general moisture around. this can be a bit misleading because if you go on the BALM website, you can actually put in your longitude and latitude and it'll spit out a number and it says, this is the amount that particular longitude and latitude should get. And you go, oh yeah, okay, so that's what that forecast means. But it's not. I mean, they're just trying to give you a value to show you kind of the idea of the amount of rainfall you can get. But it's regional. It's not quite so property specific. Whereas those weather forecasts, the 7-day forecasts, those are much more like to a finer scale. So more like a property scale. And then, John's going to talk later about the grazing land management and how you can change your decisions. And it's important to remember that, the most important thing is just to have a good plan. And most people I talk to that have good plans, they say, oh, I don't need a seasonal forecast anyway. They all look at them and adjust their plans a little bit. And that's kind of the idea. These seasonal forecasts, they're not a silver bullet. You got to have a plan in place. And then as John will talk about, that'll allow you just to tweak your plan just a little bit, kind of based on what's in the forecast. Okay, so just real quick on how to read a seasonal forecast for those who don't know. So I have Normanton on there. This is for the chance of exceeding median rainfall for June, July, and August 2021. So the median rainfall for Normanton is, of course, 0. And as I mentioned before, they got 4 mils in August. And here we can see that there was a 75 to 80% chance of exceeding median at some point between June and August. And actually this forecast was correct. However, if you saw this forecast and you lived in Normanton, you'd probably be expecting a bit more rain than that, but that's not actually how these forecasts work. So it's important in order to correctly interpret these forecasts, these seasonal forecasts, you need to know what your median is, because if you don't, then you don't know how much, what it means to exceed your median. You need a value to begin with. Your map time period, so that's just June to August. But we don't know when in that June to August period we'll get the rainfall. It could be on the very last day of August, or it could be on the very first day of June. We don't know. And that's where, you kind of have to look back and check the weather forecast. We don't know how much more than the median. It could be 1 mil more than the median, and this forecast is right. So if Normanton had gotten 1 mil or even a half mil, this forecast would have been right. Even though most people in Normanton probably would have said, oh, we didn't get any rain, half mil, oh, it didn't even reach the ground. Well, that's just how these forecasts work. Yeah, so feel free to ask me any questions about that if you have them. Okay, so now let's move into what the forecast is actually showing. So this is a forecast for October, November, and December 2021. We can see for most of the Savannah Gulf area, there's pretty much a 65 plus chance of exceeding median rainfall. I put a couple of the medians over here. So for example, in Normanton, it's about 167 mils. I did happen to look on the BALM website and it showed kind of for that Normanton region, it'll probably actually be up to maybe 200 potentially. There's sort of a 58% chance of over 200. So that's interesting. But of course, that also means that on the flip side, there's still, a chance of not exceeding median. So even if there's 75% chance of exceeding median, 25% chance of not exceeding median. And the way to think about these is, are the odds shifted in the favor of getting rain, or are they shifted away from the favor of getting rain? And then what do we do with that information? Okay. If you don't like the BALM, and lots of people don't, this one, so this is the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting. It's a mouthful. We can just say the ECMWF. They are arguably the best seasonal forecasting system in the world for Australia. So if you don't like the BALM, if the BALM has failed you in the past and you don't want to look at it anymore, no problem. Check out this one. So here it's the exact same forecast. So it's just chance of exceeding median. They do have other forecasts which are more useful. Talk to John about those. He can explain where to find them and how to interpret them. They do provide more information. And we can see that for most of the Savannah Gulf area, we are in this sort of 60 to 70% right along the Gulf Coast, but then 70 to 80% across the rest of the area, chance of exceeding median for October, November, December. That's what that OND means. And so it looks quite similar to the BALM forecast. which is good. When the forecasts look similar, coming from different models, it gives us more faith that they'll be right. So moving out to, this is now November, December, January. Again, it's from that European Center. Again, chance of exceeding median. And yeah, about the same, sort of 60 to 70 or 70 to 80% chance of exceeding median rainfall. So hopefully we should have good rainfall. I did notice I looked at the BOM monthly rainfall forecast. They only issue them for October and November. And October was looking a bit wetter, potentially, or had a bit more potential for exceeding median than November and December. However, we get more rain in November and December. So you kind of have to, balance that against the percentage chance. Okay, anyway, but it looks like there's moisture around, there's, rain around. At least it's not showing a dry forecast. Okay, and now this is December, January, February. And we can still see that there is still that 60 to 70% chance of exceeding median. However, for other areas, if you own property in other areas, it's kind of in that 50-50, like there's no clear indication one way or the other of what's going to happen. So for this forecast this far out, I'm going to check back. I'm going to look back again, probably the first week of October. I'll check these forecasts again and just see if they've changed or not, or what's happening. Because as you get closer to the time, so as we get closer to, say, December, January, February, these forecasts become more accurate. That's true of any forecast. So another forecast that I mentioned earlier is this chance of early northern rainfall onset. So we define northern rainfall onset as the accumulation of 50 millimeters of rain after the 1st of September. So it's kind of a helpful metric, kind of not a helpful metric, but it's what we have at the moment. So essentially it's just showing, like, is your rain likely to start early or is it likely to be a bit later? And this forecast is showing that for most of the area in the Gulf Savannah region, it's sort of above 50% likely to be earlier than normal. Now you might say, well, Chelsea, what's normal? They have that on the website too. So for this area, it's sort of mid-November, early December is when you could normally expect to have 50 millimeters accumulated. So yeah, so hopefully it will be a touch earlier this year. So why are these forecasts all showing rain? It's a really important question. If you look at a forecast and you don't know why, and you need to make a decision based on that forecast, or you want to modify your plan based on that forecast, give John a ring or give myself a ring. I'll put my email in the chat, and just have us double check that forecast, because at certain times of year and certain forecasts, I look at them and I go, something doesn't look quite right with that forecast. And it's one of those things, that you kind of got to be in the game for a little bit to sort of see those things. So if you're ever uncertain, we're here for you. Free service, any time of day, weekends, why not? Okay, so why? So we have warm water to the north of Australia. Specifically, we currently have an Indian Ocean dipole event. That's just a fancy way of saying that the water in the Indian Ocean near the equator is warmer near Indonesia and colder near Africa. That's all that's saying. And so when that happens, it tends to bring more moisture to our region, because if we have warm water kind of north of Australia in the Indo area, warmer water is more likely to sort of evaporate. And if we have warmer air above it, warmer air can hold more moisture. And if air can hold more moisture, then we have more potential for rainfall down the track. There's also warmer water in the Coral Sea, and that's probably what's really impacting and really driving that rainfall for the Savannah Gulf region, is that warm water in the Coral Sea. It's left over from last year's La Nina. Interestingly enough, most models are now predicting us to go back into a La Nina this year in sort of November, December. However, it'll likely finish up by kind of March, April. So that means it's going to be a short event. It's not forecast to be a super strong event. So the impacts may be marginal. I'm going to put this out here. We'll see. This is not scientific. This is just Chelsea's opinion. I'm curious to see if we have a couple of cyclones this year, like more than normal or one that's bigger than normal. Anyway, well maybe we'll check back after the wet season and see if I was right. Okay, so this is my final slide, and then I'll pass over to John because this is a really important one. So everybody looks, so now this is a weather forecast. This is a forecast for the next 7 days. It is showing rainfall in Innisfail in May, because why not? And so essentially, most people look at this and they go, okay, there's a 100% chance of 10 to 30 millimeters. Not true. What this forecast actually is saying is that there's a 100% chance of any rain, which is defined as 0.2 millimeters. There's a 50% chance of 10 millimeters, and there's a 25% chance of at least 30 millimeters. And that is how you would read every single forecast that is shown like this, where there's a percentage chance and then a range given. It's always, the percentage chance is always for 0.2 at least. And then the range is always 50% for the smaller value and 25% for the, 50% for the larger value and 25% for the smaller value. The BOM is going to do a major overhaul of their website in early next year, and they are actually going to completely clarify this whole forecast. And instead of doing a 50% chance, they're actually going to do a 75% chance. So hopefully that'll be a bit more useful. Maybe it won't, I don't know, but they'll make it really much more easy to read and much more intuitive, because right now it's not intuitive. Just FYI, they are also updating their climate model system in early November. So if you see a sudden improvement in the forecast from early November, that could be why. They're not expecting it to be hugely different, but it will definitely be a bit different. And I've seen forecasts out of the new ones, and they can be quite different from what's currently being shown out of the old system. So early November, we're all excited. Thank you. Happy to take any questions at any point in time.
Thank you, Chelsea. I think I'm back in control now. Let me just have a look at that chat box, and I'll keep an eye on it as well. But I'm just going to quickly run through just for 10 minutes about how we can actually utilize the information that we've just learned. So once we have the best climate information available about the months ahead, what does that mean for our management? So this project and this program is ultimately trying to influence your decisions on ground. If the information we're providing isn't able to do that, well, then we're not meeting the needs or the outcomes of the project, and we're not trying to provide information for the sake of it. We're trying to assist you with your grazing land management and your business operations. Before we jump into it, Charles made a good point. No point looking at median forecast values when you don't have any information about the medians in that area. And so this gives you a bit of a rundown across the Northern Gulf with some of the major centres we have. If we're just going to look at the end of the year and we saw forecasts that were indicating above median rainfall, well, October for the area is not a high rainfall month in general. And so we probably shouldn't get our hopes up about that too much. Whereas November, we begin to get sort of a 1 to 2 inches, 25 to 50 mil. And if we're getting above median values in that area, then we're actually starting to talk about enough rainfall to stimulate pasture growth. So that's a promising sign. Ultimately, it comes down to decisions. And so decisions. And I've just got a couple of examples here of how the information that Chelsea's just provided us with might influence some on-ground decision-making for graziers. And we've got some pretty simple or fundamental points that came out of Chelsea's speech. Is we can expect above median spring and summer rainfall. We've got a 50% chance of a La Nina or a weak La Nina event that appears to be forming. And there's an indication that we'll have an early rainfall onset, but in the range of 55 to 65% confidence level there. And we've also had a very good or good to very good season last year in terms of rainfall and pasture growth. So we're coming possibly into consecutive good years. So the takeaway points, if we're talking about the muster coming up in September and October, which would be the second round for most, from that information we've got, there'd be no need for any radical culling or reduction in herd numbers based off the information we have. And basically, we'd be trying to ensure that we have enough feed until the end of November. So if we're getting that 40 to 50 mils in November and adding on a week or two of growth before we get any substantial pasture on the ground, it'd be safe to say for most people that if you're budgeting out to that late November, start of December, then you're doing the right thing by your country and by your animals. December muster, the potential third round. Again, looking at that same sort of information that Chelsea provided us with, the takeaway points would be that we're unlikely to need that third round. It's very rare that we do, but we don't have to look back too far to 2019, 2020, where we didn't have rainfall until late January, which was foreseen by most of our models and was definitely forecasted around this time in September. But yet we had people out there in December and January having to muster cattle to reduce mortality, to pull calves off and all that sort of thing. This year, with the forecast we have, you'd be very, very surprised if that was necessary. Supplementation, really important up here in the north. And if the forecast is correct for most areas, we would have had that 30 to 50 mils by the end of November, that 1 to 2 inches. And so we'd be looking to transition from our dry season supplement to our wet season supplement sometime in November. Our dry season supplement, of course, being our urea, and our wet season being our phosphorus supplementation. So you need to be considering your supplementation orders, your accessibility, your staff resources and that sort of thing to make sure that you're able to do that in November and that you don't get caught out with some heavy rain that could come in December. Just a quick point on phosphorus. I can't help myself but reiterate the importance of it. It's a major problem for us here in northern Queensland and northern Australia because we've got such low phosphorus levels in our soil. So the major impact of phosphorus deficiency is that it leads to a reduction in appetite. And obviously lower pasture intake leads to lower energy and protein intake. So for our breeders, this reduced nutrient intake can lead to issues in maintaining body condition, and resulting from that, we have lower weaning rates and increased mortality. We can even jump ahead to decisions being made next year with the forecast that we have today. So that above median spring and summer, the 50-50 chance of La Nina and the early start to the growing season, the pasture growing season. If we take away some points from that, it would be that all indications are that summer should provide good pasture growth and that this could be our second consecutive season of good growing conditions. So the forecasts don't indicate any need for radical weaning or an early muster next year. And if your stocking rates are correct, there should be ample feed to carry your breeders through into autumn 2022. Wet season spelling. If you were to sum up the forecast that Chelsea just summarised for us, you'd have to say it's fairly promising. And wet season spelling is one of our methods for restoring degraded paddocks and increasing animal production up here in the north. And you get by far the biggest return or the biggest impact from your wet season spell when you get good rainfall years. And so we're looking to spell country up here every 3 to 5 years. And if you're able to identify a paddock with a good forecast such as one we have now, this is your opportunity to rest country and get the best result. So fire management, sort of similar. Again, looking at those same sort of forecasts or models and the growing conditions that we had in last year's wet. Fire as a tool for removing rank pastures, stimulating new growth and controlling patch grazing and woody plants. And we're likely to have a decent body of fuel around as we head into this wet season, given the growing conditions we had last year. Hence, a good opportunity to effectively use fire as a management tool. So this could be a good year to burn. And I've had a look at the temperature and rainfall forecasts that are probably suggesting November, early November, as a good time for burning for much of the region. Improved pastures and crops. This is becoming more common here in the north as people try to boost feed quality, protein and digestibility, particularly throughout the dry season. That protein drought that we get over that extended 7-month dry season here in the north. And you're seeing stylos as a major scalable tool to sort of address that problem at scale. And more recently, plantings of things like Leucaena as well for similar reasons. Again, the trick is to pick your years to get the best results at the lowest costs and to reduce the likelihood of failed establishments. So that's where the real cost comes in, is complete failures where you're trying to establish these sorts of crops. So if you've been waiting for the right season, this year's looking promising, and try to plant before the first rains, which would probably be late October for your best results, but keep an eye on the rainfall forecast in the lead up to that. So there was probably 6 or 7 examples just off the bat of how some of the information Chelsea spoke about could inform some decisions that you're making on property. It will never be the sole purpose for doing anything, but it will always be a contributing factor that might lean you in one direction or the other. And if I was to quickly put it all together in a quick scenario for you, just as I finish up, we've got Grazier Joe here, and he's taken a look at the forecast for this year as represented by Chelsea, and he's noticed that there's an ability to capitalise on a promising forecast. So he likes to look at what he sees. He's got that early rainfall onset, 55 to 65% chance, and he's seeing that we're getting above median spring and summer rainfall forecasted, and he's liking the look of a weak La Nina conditions evolving. So what does he do? Well, with the odds in his favour, he's decided to do the following. He's decided to wet season spell a paddock that's been declining in land condition over the past 5 years, and he's decided that it needs a rest. He's going to use his second round coming up in the first week of October to adjust his stock numbers and leave this paddock empty for the rest of October, from October onwards, So this is going to help him to maintain a fuel load in this paddock and carry a fire in early November to help clean up some woody thickening that the paddock's got. And following the fire, Joe plans to establish stylos in the paddock to boost animal production. Stylo is established best in paddocks with bare ground, so particularly after fire or being chewed down. And that's by far the best way to get results when you're establishing them. So Joe plans to keep the paddock spelled until Easter next year when he does his first round for 2022. 4 things. He's confident there'll be plenty of feed available in the stocked paddocks given the forecast and the promising summer rain. So he's not too worried about a super early muster next year. He knows that spelling country for the first 6 months after seeding stylos gives him the best chance of establishment and prolonged success of that activity. He wants to let his 3P grasses go to seed to get the most out of his wet season spell. So he's happy to lock it up for 5-6 months. And he knows how important it is to rest country after a burn. And so that's just an example or a scenario of how you might take some of the information we've got and tie it into several management decisions that can be fairly influential when it comes to managing your grazing property. So yes, an example just there for you of how to integrate climate information into your everyday decision making. And as we mentioned earlier, and we can't stress enough, seasonal climate outlooks are just another tool for you to use. Our job and the job of this project is to make sure that you know how to find the tool and then you know how to use it properly once you've found it. And that's that interpretation piece that Chelsea was talking about. At the end of the day, we make suggestions and it's up to you to make decisions. So that's all from me. Thanks a lot for listening. We managed to stick to that 40-minute sort of time.